If you're sitting comfortably, then I'll begin. In a faraway land, there was a place called the Sleeping Kingdom. Everybody in the Sleeping Kingdom had been asleep for exactly 100 years. One of those was a beautiful princess, Sleeping Beauty. One day, along came a beautiful prince. The prince sees the Sleeping Kingdom. He sees the beautiful princess. And of course, he wants to wake her up. So he goes and kisses her. She doesn't wake up. So he kisses her again. She doesn't wake up. He kisses her again and again and again. Things weren't quite so politically correct in those days. And again, and finally, she murmurs, she stirs, and she's fully awake. A guard has also woken up, and he rushes in, tries at first to shield the princess, but then he looks up at the ferocious, charming prince. He backs away, frightened, and runs off to tell others in the royal kingdom. One by one, the message is conveyed to others. It grows. Everybody in the royal kingdom seems to know. And eventually, the personal advisor to the king tells the king, who issues a decree. He sends a message to the princess. Slap that prince around the face. It's a sweet story, but let me tell this story in a slightly different way now. On the surface of cell membranes, there exist cell surface receptors. They can look different in different ways, but some of them, for instance, are separated monomers of a dimer. And they don't form the dimer, perhaps, until a growth factor, a protein, perhaps, or a small molecule even, outside the cell, docks with the cell surface receptor. In some cases, that can bring two monomers together, and in nearly all those cases, it causes a reaction. Perhaps that reaction will be autocatalytic. In other words, the rearranged cell surface receptor can catalyze the reaction itself. And very, very often, that reaction is phosphorylation. The residues that get phosphorylated are typically tyrosine residues. Several phosphorylations may occur on the cell surface receptor. And when they do, regions that weren't quite so hydrophilic before become much more hydrophilic. The protein changes shape. And when it changes shape, it might be recognized by another protein, which could dock, perhaps be phosphorylated, perhaps dissociate and change shape again. Many of these phosphorylation steps are mediated by enzymes which deliver a terminal phosphate group from ATP to typically a tyrosine residue. Those phosphorylated proteins can form complexes. The signaling can take place in various different ways, many different ways. But typically, the signals tend to converge on relatively few number of pathways, about 16 actually. These pathways send signals to the intelligence of the cell, the nucleus. The nucleus is where genetic information is stored. The signal could be suppress the production of this protein. We don't need it anymore. Or it could be upregulate this protein that we haven't been using. We need it now. And those proteins go out into the cell and they initiate different effects. It could be that they tell the cell it's time to die, apoptosis. In the case of the receptors that I'm interested in, the TRK receptors, they may dock with a series of proteins called neurotrophins, and one of those is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which causes autophosphorylation, a cascade of events, and the cells respond, neurons respond by growing, particularly towards the source of BDNF, which often is a synapse, or a synapse that's forming between two dendrites of a neuron. So BDNF interactions with TrkB are intimately involved with learning and memory. I used to be overwhelmed by cell signaling. There were so many different pathways drawn in so many different ways, involving abbreviations that I didn't recognize. I didn't know what that protein was. And worse, some proteins have more than one abbreviation. But in the first instance, it's important just to get the big picture. And it's nearly always the same. An extrinsic factor causes a conformational change in the cell surface receptor, which leads to modifications, typically phosphorylations, maybe dephosphorylations with phosphatases. Word gets to the nucleus to express proteins that are needed to grow, to divide, or to die. Cell signaling is a beautiful thing. If you really want to learn some of the wonderful pathways for cell signaling, I recommend this book, and I've left the link down below. Of course, the princess didn't slap the prince around the face. The message was, stay together, be happy, have lots of children, grow and divide. And they all lived happily ever after. Thank you for listening. I hope it works out for you too. Bye-bye.
Eliminavi